So I just wanted to clear up a couple of things before we get started here. First and foremost, you're not Dan Gilbert.
No, sir. I think that's pretty obvious.
Dan was a little bit under the weather, so unfortunately he couldn't join us. And Bill, I just want to start by saying thank you for stepping in. I know you got your board in town. It's a busy week, and we appreciate you being with us today.
Listen, I'm happy, man. I mean, we had to go way down the bench to be able to find somebody to come in and fill for Dan, so you guys were stuck with me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was only like 7 or 8 calls. So let's dig right into it. It's already been a fascinating morning, talking about investment, talking about attracting talent. One of the things that Dan's often quoted about is regional transit. And he always says, we need regional transit because that's what young people want. And in a Crain survey, we've actually found that 73% of millennials put regional transit at the top when considering a city to move to. So when you guys think about it internally, what does that look like as you're master planning some of your own investments?
That's a great question. I mean, clearly Dan has been very open and vocal about this. He said more than just that one thing about regional transit. And it's interesting how regional transit comes together with retaining talent. I mean, the reason this event exists is that people who have grown up in this area have left to go somewhere else because something was missing, right? And we're trying to figure out how to get people back here. Talent retention is a huge piece of the puzzle, and transit is a big piece of that, right? So at the end of the day, we've had opportunities that for years and years we've talked about this, right? And every time we get to the finish line, something happens, people get tribal, they just don't come together and make it happen. So if we want this area to continue to build and grow, we have to figure out transit. And it's gotta be regional, it's gotta be able to get people from the airport in, or from the neighborhoods in, or from the suburbs in, right? Because you talk about your data, right? I mean, the Gen Z population is going to be a higher percentage of people that don't want to have to park downtown. And if you think about the amount of money that folks would have to spend driving, parking, doing all that, right? Parking is a problem downtown as it is, which, by the way, is a good thing, because that means there's a lot of people downtown. And what's happening downtown recently, what you see at night, the activity, the restaurants, there's so much good stuff going on. But if we're going to continue to grow as a city, we got to make sure that the folks that live in the neighborhoods or live in the suburbs have the ability to get down here and interact without having to drive. And so it's an investment, Casey. It's not an expense. It's an investment in the future of this region, along with how do we attract and retain talent.
There are so many things that are a challenge for Detroit because it's a legacy city, because it's been here, because it's so big. Originally when the city was master planned, they weren't taking millennials into consideration. It was factories, and it was moving big things like, glass and rubber and, all the components of vehicles. Now when you guys talk about it, think about a city like Nashville. Really easy to get around. Your scooters, your Ubers, the lifts. I mean, they've just got an easier infrastructure. What do we actually need? I mean, is it all of it?
Well, listen, I mean, ideally you'd have a robust transit system, right? I mean, Chicago has the L, right? I mean, lots of cities have a subway. I don't see us necessarily doing that. If you take a look, even the Q line, right? The Q line was a great concept that gets people up and down Woodward. Interestingly enough, ridership is up on the Q line post-pandemic, right? So folks want to be able to move around a city. And so, we got to come together and figure out the exact answer, because I think if you try to do everything, nothing gets done. But if we don't start making progress, and that includes locally from a funding perspective, state-wise, federal, it's an infrastructure problem that we have to solve, and we've got to come together and get over ourselves, get out of our own way if we really want this region to continue to grow. And when you look at the growth and what's happened, and we recruit people we're now recruiting senior leaders and a bunch of people into the organization from around the country. We've got folks coming from Silicon Valley, and they come here and they love it. And they see what's going on, and they see the vibe, and they see what's happening downtown. They're moving here, right? So it's not like we can't get people to come here. We've done great work to get to that place. This isn't about where we are today. As Dan always says, what got you here is not going to get you there. We have to think differently about transit.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people here that agree with you on that one. I will tell you, every time you mention there's conversations at the federal level, it makes me a little nervous. Are you comfortable with the conversations that are happening currently in the city about this topic?
I'm not sure I'm comfortable about a lot of things, right? Comfort doesn't really have anything to do with it. At the end of the day, you should be having uncomfortable conversations if you want to make real change, right? So, yeah, I mean, the federal government is, that would be the last resort, I think. There's not much that gets done in that beltway. I'm actually going there next week to just, I don't really even know why I'm going, but I'm going. But yeah, I mean, I think in the state, there's the opportunity to create funds to do this along with a solid, real economic development plan that allows us to recruit companies and not lose out on big opportunities to the Tennessees, to the Ohios, who have a better economic development plan. So it's not just one thing. It's got to come together, and it's got to really happen inside of the state of Michigan first before the feds will even take a look.
Keeping on the topic of investing in Detroit, Rocket Companies, the Rock family of companies, has been incredibly successful. I think the last time I got an ISM's book, there were over 1,000 companies now.
Oh, there's not that many, man. I mean, it might look like that, but no, not that close.
A lot of logos
Call it
on
100,
those pages.
150, something like that.
We talk a little bit about maybe an example of one or two things that didn't work out so well. I mean, every time you think about Dan Gilbert, everything's perfect, right? It's gold, no problem, easy. You've been there long enough to know that's not the case. And then also maybe one or two examples that you're really excited about.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, the reality of life is, Dan's an entrepreneur at heart. He always has been. He's got the unique ability to be an entrepreneur and start something, but also that unique ability to run something large. And a lot of times you don't see that in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. There's so many things that we've done that didn't work. I couldn't even begin to count them. And frankly, it's irrelevant because we just leave those things where they belong in the past and we continue to move forward. Dan is, he's an idea person. He wants to try things. He wants to test things. One of our philosophies is launch and learn, right? The only way you can learn whether something works or not is to go do it. And we encourage people inside of our organization to make mistakes because that means you're taking risk, right? That means you're doing something that's a little bit out on the edge. The only thing we say is just make new mistakes, right? Don't make the same ones over and over again. So you're going to learn by each thing that you do, by each endeavor that you take on. And listen, at the end of the day, you can make a decision, not make a decision. You don't learn anything by not making a decision, right? If you make a decision and you lose at it, so what? Move on. I even think about Mortgage in a Box that started everything about online lending. If you think about Detroit, man, online lending started in Detroit. Paved roads started in Detroit. This assembly line started in Detroit. Lots of cool stuff has started in Detroit. Pizza, okay? I don't know if it started in Detroit, but it's certainly the pizza. You could call it the pizza capital. We call it the mortgage capital, right? So, so many things that you learn from trying, and doing nothing never gets you anywhere.
Okay, so staying on that topic, I love Dan's motto of doing good by doing well. And I always think that it's really easy to say that when you have a gazillion dollars. Talk a little bit about what it's like being, at the ground level. You talk about making mistakes. Some people can't afford to make those kinds of mistakes, big mistakes. But what about people that actually, are very interested in the Detroit entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also are looking for real returns, and they're being attracted to Texas and to California, to New York. Can we play in that game?
Absolutely. I mean, the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Detroit has always been strong, right? 2023, 1,500 startups in and around the city of Detroit, and raising $4 billion in capital. That's not chump change, right? This is a city, by the way, that people want to be at. Take a look at what happened with the draft, right? I mean, that was a long process to get the draft here. You talked about Nashville, right? And the bones and the infrastructure that Nashville has. It was built for something like that. Detroit, not so much. But yet we found a way to bring 775,000 human beings in 3 days downtown to witness the draft. And you know what? Zero issues. And the people that came into Detroit, they felt it. We can attract people here. We can do it. We just, we have to continue to double down, continue to invest. There's money to be made here for sure. It wouldn't be the ecosystem that it is. You've got Amazons of the world and Microsofts of the world and others that are here in and around the city. So we just have to keep leaning in, right? It's that old saying, it's not the 99th whack at the stone that breaks it, it's the 100th. You just got to keep going and having the intestinal fortitude to make it happen.
Is that another Danism?
No, that's a quote I read a long, long time ago.
We'll give it to you. It is amazing when you talk about the draft and all those people that came here, how surprised they were, which is slightly annoying, but then also how much they loved it and they become ambassadors.
But it's only annoying because the reason it's annoying is because they haven't been here. The whole goal for us has got to be to get people to come here. I remember talking with Dan about this years ago, and we would have conversations with people about Detroit or investing in things. And we hung up the phone one day, and he looks at me, he goes, "We're never having another phone call like that." I go, "What do you mean? We want to recruit people, right?" He goes, "If people want to talk to us, they have to come here. They have to literally come to Detroit. They have to see it. They have to feel it. They have to touch it. They have to taste it. Otherwise, we don't want to talk to them." And I think we have to continue to have that mindset.
And it is funny because of all the work that you all and others have done, it's so easy now. Once they get here.
Easier, for sure.
Okay, switching gears, we're going to have a mayoral election coming up here next year. There's talk about the mayor. Mary had a nice chat with him yesterday. He's possibly going to run for governor in 26.
Did he declare?
What?
Did he declare?
Mary didn't get it out
He was
of
a
him
little vague?
yesterday.
Okay.
But if you think about how good he's been for the city over the last decade, we've definitely had our ups and downs when it comes to civic leadership. From your enterprise's point of view, what does the future look like? What do we need? And to Dan's point, how do we get from here to here?
That's a great question. I think Mike's done a phenomenal job as mayor. When you think about the public-private partnerships that have been able to exist, him understanding how the private sector can help the public sector, what it really comes down to is collaboration. We'll work with anybody from a civic leadership perspective, but we just have to, everybody's got to keep that in mind, right? I mean, from the citizens to the businesses to the philanthropic community. Years ago, it used to be everybody kind of fought about things, right? And everybody went off in their own little corner and built their own little thing and did their own little thing. We've seen a great amount of collaboration happen. It's the only way that you could see what's happened in the last 15 years down here, come to fruition. And so, a lot of times people get in their own minds like, what's in it for them? That's got nothing to do with what we want to get done here in Detroit. What can we do to continue to advance the ball for this city? I mean, we've made a lot of progress. We have so far to go. Right, so far to go. I mean, the downtown has gotten stronger. The neighborhoods, we're continuing to work on that. We've got to continue to work on the neighborhoods. We keep investing as a philanthropic arm, the Rocket Community Fund and the Gilbert Family Foundation, into things that are going on in the neighborhoods because you can't have a strong Detroit without having both of those be as strong as possible. I just think the civic leadership piece of that will be critically important going forward. And if everybody has the outcome in mind, the right outcome for the city and what, where we can go. And again, talent attraction, opportunity for all, transit and being able to get folks from the neighborhoods downtown if they can't drive. All of that stuff goes into continuing to make Detroit a phenomenal place. And I'll say this, and this was something that stuck in my head. By the way, wouldn't it be the best year ever for the Lions to win the Super Bowl? I mean, this year, going into New Orleans and all the stuff that was going on. But I think about last year, right? And so we were going to play San Francisco. And there was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal, and it was comparing Detroit and San Francisco, where San Francisco was and where it is.
I hear that city's dangerous
Detroit
nowadays.
Was to where it is. It's an amazing transformation both ways, right? So there's momentum, right? I mean, it's the law of physics. What the body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. We have momentum. We got to keep building.
I love that. It's pretty incredible, too, when you mentioned the last 15 years and you think about the impact that the Gilbert organization has had. Look where we're sitting right now. Does this happen without somebody like Dan digging in? And then, it just snowballs, and it's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, what an incredible thing for Bill Ford and his family.
Yeah, I mean, this is a phenomenal investment, this facility and what the Ford family has done here. I mean, there have been families and catalysts over the history of Detroit, right? Dan happens to be a recent catalyst, right? But there has been folks that have done well, that have really given back to this city, and I'm blown away by this. This is a beautiful, beautiful facility, and when folks decide to invest in Detroit, great things can happen. I don't think no one would have believed that anybody would do something like this with this building for as long as it stood here, right? I don't think people believe that the downtown buildings that we bought and redeveloped would have happened, right? So somebody's got to have the vision, the capital, but really the desire to be a force for good. And when you say, doing well by doing good, I mean, we think about it as for more than profit, right? Profit's not a dirty word. If you don't make money as a business, you can't invest it back into the community, right? You just have to make sure that you've got the right leadership that wants to invest back in the community.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest things about this city. The money follows money. And with that leadership, it's a lot of fun to watch. You had mentioned the investment in Henry Ford's health expansion. An unbelievable pledge, $375 million to help bring the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab to Detroit. Another thing that we would have never said could have been possible. Obviously, in honor of Nick Gilbert, who passed away a year ago from that disease. So, can things like that go beyond philanthropy? Is there another play there? Healthcare innovation, can that help spur new technologies and opportunities for people?
Yeah, I mean, of course there is. It's just one piece of a larger project going on at Henry Ford, right? And, when you think about the NF Center that Dan and Jennifer are investing in and how personal that is to them, also think about the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab and the stroke treatment that's coming as a result. It's those two things together. And I think if Dan were here, he would tell you, it's amazing how much perspective you get when you go through a stroke, when you lose a child, the things that you want to be able to learn from and to help others, right? And if you think about stroke, I didn't know this. Black Americans are almost twice as likely to have a stroke than white Americans. And when you think about investing in something like the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab here in Detroit, we're better. I mean, Detroiters deserve incredible healthcare. They deserve innovative, cutting-edge healthcare and the innovation that goes into that. So this will create jobs. This will bring people in. This will bring doctors in. This will bring innovation in, and it will give Detroit something that it richly, richly deserves. And so I know that's a big driver of why Dan and Jen are doing it.
It's really incredible, and it feels like the tech and innovation fits here. It makes sense as another evolution of what we do.
It's a tech and innovation hub. It's always been that, right? I mean, you can go back years in Detroit. We were the arsenal of democracy, right? I mean, building tanks and planes in World War II. And I mean, there's just so much history. And we've gone, you're right, as you said, ups and downs, right? I go back to 2006 and the Super Bowl that was here and all the stuff that Roger Penske and crew did to help people be able to come to Detroit and see Detroit differently. It's been an evolution. And, here we are in 2024 going into 2025. You think about the next 10, 20 years and what we can do together if we just continue, like I said, put your shoulder to the wheel and push, and let's keep working together.
You just mentioned the neighborhoods and how important it is to tie everything together. The Family Foundation is now working on a really cool project with the manufactured homes. I know it's more of a test pilot and showing how we can do this and then how you can scale it. Talk about how or when we know if this project is successful, what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I was talking to Laura Grant about this the other day. I mean, basically you're building a home in a factory and you're moving it once. You're putting it on a foundation. This is not what people would consider typical manufactured housing. This is a real stick-built home. It's just built in a factory and moved. And it's a test. It's a pilot, right? I mean, I think we're doing 9 or 10 homes. They are less expensive to be able to put together, which is critically important. I mean, housing affordability is a major issue in this country. And if like I said, if you think about Detroit, I mean, Detroit back in the day kind of created the middle class and all the homes that were built here ultimately, but that's an aging stock, right? So how can we be a part of the solution in testing? This is the innovation piece, right? Do things work? Don't they work? Do they fail or not? You make philanthropic investments. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So, I think we'll know more here in the next 12 months. But if we can prove that we can do it cheaper, better, more effectively, Americans don't agree on a lot anymore. But I think they do. Like 90% of folks still believe in the American dream, still believe in the dream of owning their own home. And so I think this is a very worthy and noble thing to take on. We just have to be honest with ourselves on how it works. And I think we'll learn more in the next 12 months.
We kind of rolled over the Rocket family of companies, and I wanted to touch on StockX because I think it's a perfect example of an idea, a guy with an idea, and then using this city and infrastructure to, really push it forward. that I think that might be the ultimate example.
I'm noticing your tennis shoes here. I think
Got mine
maybe you
on
got those on
StockX.
StockX, right? The stock market of things.
I was all ready for Dan. He gives me a ton of shit about not having cool sneakers. I was ready. But I think another awesome example, and I think it's doable, and I think more people could do that in this city.
Again, it takes a little bit of vision. It does take a little bit of capital. But if you look at, there's two organizations inside the family of companies that were startups. Rock Financial, which is now Rocket Companies, the largest mortgage lender in the country, and StockX, which is just an idea that Dan and the founder had of creating the stock market of things, and watching that grow. I mean, it's a real international business that came right out of the brains and the grit of folks here in Detroit. And when I think about the growth of our organization, this region and this city has been a piece of that puzzle. The people in Detroit are unbelievably resilient. They're phenomenal human beings. They have there's just an edge and something that you need if you're an entrepreneur to be able to survive. And so, I get back to like the transit piece, right? I mean, entrepreneurs are looking for ways to cut costs every way they can. They need an opportunity to get over that threshold to see that business be successful. And so, transit's another way for them to be able to do that. So I'm immensely proud of what we've been able to accomplish, but it takes a village, man. It's not just Dan, it's not just me. It's thousands and thousands of people, and we've seen that throughout the lifetime of the city. It's taken multiple people and multiple constituents to come together to create opportunity that exists today and into the future.
It's funny. I'm sitting here listening to this guy. He kind of sounds like a mayor. Sounds like he's got some stuff figured out. I'm just putting that out there.
My friend, you have the better chance of seeing the Lord Almighty than seeing that happen.
Well, we did start Wednesday night in a church, so you never know. You cannot deny that Dan and yourself and the entire family of companies have done so much for the city. The impact is unbelievable. Everyone here can agree that, yes, momentum, yes, still a long way to go. If there were people from outside of the city who have done well and are looking at ways to contribute, give us a couple examples of things, either large scale or small scale, that people can do to really help out with this new momentum.
Well, that's a great question. I guess it depends on the individual. It depends on, what they do and where they are. I mean, if you're someone who's been successful elsewhere and you're an expat, there's all kinds of philanthropic opportunities in this city that still need a lot of help. Any business model can succeed here, right? I know this is the Motor City, right? And we continue to want to see that companies do well. But, technology, innovation, AI, I mean, there's so much that's changing the landscape of the way businesses run now. And you can do that anywhere, right? So why not do it in a place like Detroit that really does have a lot going on right now? It's open for business. It wants folks to come in. I mean, again, this is the reason this thing exists, right? I mean, it's how do we bring people back to this city? And I actually think that we're kind of at an inflection point. And the more we can get folks to come here, the more we can get them to see what's going on here, the more we can entice them to bring some dollars to the table. Philanthropically or otherwise, I believe that the return will be there for them in the long haul. And, I think we have multiple examples that people can look at around the city to see that.
Couldn't agree more. And as we're wrapping up here, one kind of final big picture question. It always amazes me at what can get done in this city. I mean, all the way back to just thinking even about the CompuWare building. I mean, there were these big moments where, big parts of the city have been redeveloped. Dan decided to build a gigantic building in the middle of the city because he thought it was important and he thought we needed, a little help in our skyline. In the meantime, we've moved General Motors. We're gonna have another building right there that's gonna have less people working in it. Can you share at all some of the vision coming out of your shop on what happens to the RenCen, what that area should look like, and maybe any other large scale things you guys are working on?
No.
That's it, he's not leaving. Lock the doors.
Listen, I think Hudson's Detroit's going to be a legacy project for Dan. It's going to be a phenomenal building. If you guys haven't been over to the Book Tower, go check it out. I mean, that was a phenomenal renovation. that's a work in progress. I mean, I don't think we know yet what's going to be, what will happen there. All we do know is it's riverfront property, and it's a major asset, right? And so, what can we do to ultimately take advantage of that and make it the best it can possibly be? It's still too early.
That's what
to,
I
to
said.
read
What
into
can
that.
we do?
We'll find out.
Okay.
Time will tell. I'm not here to reveal anything.
All right. Well then.
All right, dude.
That's all right. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Bill, thanks again for stepping in. Really appreciate you and your insights and everything your team has contributed to this city. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Emerson.
Thanks, guys.